Why has Samsung folded its Galaxy Fold phone ambitions?
And why is Google jumping on the free music bandwagon?
Vertical Hold is proudly sponsored by NetComm, taking Australian technology to the global market.
Welcome to Vertical Hold Behind the Tech News, where we talk to Australia's leading technology journalists to get the stories behind the news of the week. I'm Alex Kidman, and I'm joined as always by Adam Turner, a man whose Galaga score I'm determined to beat by the end of the year, even though I don't actually know what it is.
Mate, I'm pushing up. I haven't hit 200,000 yet, but I'm on my way and I'm going to practice extra hard now.
You're going down, Turner, you're going down. We're also joined once again by news technology editor and gadget guru, Jennifer Dudley-Nicholson. Jen, welcome back to the show.
Hello. I don't think that I'm equipped for this Galaga battle, but I'm willing to give it a shot. Sure.
This week, we'll be unfolding the story around the removal of the Samsung Galaxy Fold from the market, as well as why so many music streaming services are going free. But first, it's time to check out this week's technology news. Adam, what's happening in the world of tech?
Google is joining the fight against misinformation during the Australian federal election campaign, launching its first bureau in the Asia-Pacific region to assist journalists and publishers in unearthing and exposing misleading, false and untrue claims. Based at the Centre for Media Transition at the University of Technology, Sydney, Google's new operation will train and work with 4,000 professional journalists and student reporters across Australia and New Zealand to develop the skills and expertise to reveal disinformation.
Microsoft is helping to fund research into the ongoing viability of the Great Barrier Reef, as well as providing Azure server access to the Queensland University of Technology in order to aid them in processing drone-derived data that could lead to insights into perils such as coral bleaching. It's hoped that ongoing research and AI-driven work may help to save as much of the reef as possible before it's too late.
The Australian Electoral Commission is already keeping social media services in check, demanding that Facebook and Twitter take down unauthorised political advertising from an anti-Labor pro-Adani group. The paid advertisements by a group called Unemployed in Queensland were pulled after they failed to abide by laws passed last year, which require political social media ads to disclose who is really paying for the advertisement.
Our old friend Elon Musk is at it again, claiming that by mid-2020, the autonomous driving system on Tesla's electric cars will be so good that drivers will no longer have to pay attention to the road at all. Musk says that Tesla plans to back up its assertion by setting up a robot taxi company using both Tesla-owned vehicles and privately owned Teslas that would join the fleet on an ad hoc basis, almost Airbnb style.
So, Alex, do we really want Teslas with a mind of their own? If you owned a Tesla, do you want it just popping off to the shops to pick someone else up?
Well, I think they're two kind of separate discussion points. Autonomous cars are coming. I mean, this is just going to be the way of the future, and it's not like Tesla's alone in this. We know Uber's looking into this stuff. We know Google's done a bunch of work in this space. It looks like Apple has as well. So there's that side of it, and there's that whole, risk-reward thing. I'm not someone who enjoys driving, so if you could convince me it was safe, yes, I'd get into an autonomous vehicle, but you'd have to convince me it was safe. Given the price of a Tesla, I'm not so sure I want mine nipping down to that pub to pick up the guy who's had 2 pints too many in a kebab, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, have you got room for half a dozen beers and a pizza?
Exactly. Jen, would you let complete strangers into your electric car?
No, especially because it would probably be very rich and fancy because as I understand it, Teslas are quite expensive. So you're pretty much buying a chauffeur anyway.
Would you trust one of these cars to completely drive itself with no one paying any attention?
Oh, hell no. I've seen the Terminator. I understand how these things work. Like, I will trust computers to maybe show me part of the way. But even then, like, my GPS system doesn't know where it's going half the time. I don't know how I'm going to understand, how I'm going to sort of appreciate a car to take me to where I'm supposed to be going. And honestly, when you get there, it would be confused by the car parking system anyway. Nah, the whole thing's nuts.
I guess the idea, though, is Teslas are expensive. You're right, Jen. But this could help to kind of offset some of that cost if you're getting your auto Uber money out of Tesla because you have let Granny go down to the shops when she didn't have a vehicle. that could offset some of that kind of cost worry, couldn't it?
Look, potentially, but at the same time, there are so many questions about this. Besides which, is anybody still sort of agreeing that Elon Musk should be allowed to make statements like this?
That is, of course, the other question. He's rather well known for making these kind of bold statements. Although, by the sounds of it, Tesla kind of needs to. It's not in the best financial position, and all the big players do seem to be gunning for that electric car market. So maybe this is just a hype play after all.
Look, I want him to be right. Like with all things, I want him to be right. We'll just see how that goes.
Or in this case, see how it crashes. So as our regular listeners will know, the big mobile phone trend this year is meant to be foldable phones, and they're meant to be coming real soon. I mean, the Samsung Galaxy Fold launching in the US at the end of the... Wait, no. In breaking news, they're breaking. Specifically, Samsung has actually pulled at pretty much the last minute its plans to launch the Galaxy Fold in the US. Jen, what's the story here?
Apparently, we just can't have nice, new, innovative things. This was always a phone that seemed a little bit too good to be true. So they announced this. It was going to be the first mainstream folding phone. We've seen a couple of examples of, maybe this fold is made by a Chinese manufacturer and please don't touch it kind of thing. But this was going to be the first one that was on the market that would sort of appreciate this idea where you could pull it out of your pocket still, you could still shove it into your pants, but then you would fold it out and it would magically become a tablet. And we saw this launched even though we weren't allowed to touch it, which to me was quite concerning. So this is when Samsung had this big launch around the Galaxy S10, which does exist, but also showed off this phone. And as you say, it was supposed to be coming out in the US by the end of the week, and then the UK was slightly after that. We were expecting in Australia to hear about when it was coming out the week after that. So I had it penciled in the diary. I was all ready to go. They started to show it off in the US to different journalists. So they had some media events. They also had one in London, as I understand it. And they put these in the hands of technology reviewers like ourselves, not actually ourselves, which is disappointing, but like ourselves. And they broke them within 2 days, which is not necessarily a good sign for the longevity of a phone that is potentially going to cost a bomb full of money. And one of the things that people said was that they were peeling off like a plastic protector or what looked like a plastic protector of the screen, which is something that we all do when we take phones out of the cases for the first time, out of their boxes. Unfortunately, that just immediately destroyed the screen from what we're hearing. And there's a few other issues involved too, which, as I say, does not speak well of the future of folding phones or the future of this folding phone. I've got a really bad feeling at the moment.
Yeah, that screen protector thing just sounds like the most insane bit of design ever. As you say, there's that kind of natural inclination to think, oh, this is just the wrapping around the phone. I meant to take this off. But even if you don't, I mean, there were some reports of other people having problems even without that. Even if you don't, over time, any of those films are going to peel or bubble or crack, or in the Australian context, they'll heat up because they'll be in your pocket or they'll be on the dash of your car or whatever, and they'll just plain fall off. You don't want that in a $3,000 phone.
You really don't, because you're talking about the sort of money where, I mean, you would ordinarily spend that on a really high-end tablet or a laptop, probably. So you want to be holding on to this phone for much more than 2 years if you're going to purchase it, because of the expense. So to have it go after 2 days is ridiculous. And also, they're not testing this with sort of average Joe on the street. These are people who are comfortable with technology and are comfortable with, how it normally works. The very idea that you would put this plastic cover on top of the screen, on top of the most important screen in the phone, without any sort of warning that this is what you need to do, big red flags, don't touch this button, is just ludicrous. And certainly I wouldn't want to be like handing one to a kid if I actually had one and it was working, to hand it to somebody else because they might start to peel it off. It's a really weird design flaw.
You also have to question, what is Samsung doing in terms of product development and testing? How does something get to this stage? Like, who is testing them in the factory? Who is testing them somewhere along the line and not pushing them at least as hard as a reviewer would do in 48 hours? Like, this is a total failure. It was bad enough with the batteries. but this is just a total failure in their design process. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, look, I don't want to bring up the war, but there is the fact
Well,
that, you know,
I mentioned it once, but I think I got away with it.
Samsung had a little issue a few years ago with the Note 7, and all of a sudden
Did
it was
they?
all you heard about on every plane everywhere, and you know, people were very concerned that their pants were going to catch fire. And so they created a whole series of ads and presumably a whole set of quality controls around that to make sure that phones could, you know, bend and stretch and flex and be put in your pocket and not catch fire. And to its credit, this phone does not catch fire, but that's not necessarily, you know, the main motivating factor for people buying a phone. So you would think that they would do some testing and they would even do some market research. The fact that it wasn't on show at the launch event had some red flags for me, and we couldn't even see it. Like, it wasn't even, you know, inside a plastic box that we could take photos of it there, which I was disappointed with at the time. But I just wonder, is this rushed? Are they trying to beat Huawei? Is this why we're seeing this so soon? And is it why it's so incomplete? Because we're also seeing, like, as a result of all of these tests that the journalists did, and we don't know exactly how many journalists there were that actually had this phone seated to them. They're saying that, well, it could be an issue, apart from the protector, it could be an issue with the hinge and potentially parts of the screen having impact due to the hinge, which you'd imagine as well was pretty, like, easy to foresee. And then there was another issue where potentially something inside the phone has disturbed the display of the phone. And again, all of these things you would imagine would be completely foreseeable. So it sounds like a phone that's not quite ready, and that doesn't speak well of us, you know, for Australians who are quite keen to get their hands on it, because we were at the back of the queue anyway.
I love their official statement on this, actually. And it's quite weird because they don't really address the screen protector side of it. They, as you say, they said there was, you know, impact on top and bottom of exposed areas of the hinge. But the sentence that sticks with me is, there was also an instance where substances found inside the device affected the display's performance. Makes it sound like someone was smuggling their weed in the Galaxy Fold. It's truly odd. And they'd certainly started locally to see them, at least with a couple of influencers. Stephanie Bendixson, aka Hex, had shown off some photos of one on her Instagram a few days ago. So they'd started their Australian kind of push for this, and presumably they're now yanking that back because they've certainly said it's delayed indefinitely everywhere. But Jen, you brought up Huawei, and of course they've got the Foldable Mate X, and we know there are other companies working on these kinds of concepts. Do you think this is a huge kind of stumbling block just for Samsung or for foldable phones generally?
I think foldable phones, it's going to be really tricky to win confidence, because we were already talking about, like, that price. So in Australia, it's likely to be over $3,000. It could be nudging up around $4,000 for one of the top models, because once you throw in 512 gig worth of storage, then you're talking about a very expensive device. And so you really have to have confidence that it's going to last as long as you want it to in that case. Whether Huawei can do better, I'm not sure. We've yet to see that. They've got a bit of a more interesting design, I suppose, because their screen goes on the outside of the phone. But that, to me, says that it might even be more vulnerable, because there's nothing that you like more than more screen to scratch. So they at least have some more time, though, because Huawei are talking about releasing their folding phone in the second half of the year. So they've got a few more months to get the kinks out, make sure their screen protectors do not come off. So that's a bit of a heads up for them. But ultimately, I think there's going to have to be some real assurances to customers potentially buying these things before they actually go to market, now that we've seen just how badly they can go.
But at the same time, this doesn't really come as a surprise, because phones with moving parts have always been a problem. Look back to your old phones that had the slide out keyboards. We're talking pre-iPhone. That hinge, that slide was the bit that always went. So as soon as they said folding phones, there was always the concern of, yeah, that's the bit that's going to go, the hinge. Do you think that people will now start to question whether they even really want a folding phone? Maybe I'm in the minority, but I don't even see why I would want one of these things. Do you think that people will now start to question whether perhaps they'd just be better off sticking with what they've got?
I think they're a large part of the smartphone buying community who were already going to wait and see. So this was always very much like a first concept and a sort of a proof of concept, and people were going to watch while, you know, other people purchased it. I was actually really excited about it because it's something completely new. We've had like the Black Mirror, you know, candy bar smartphone with a big touchscreen in front for a long period of time. And yes, now we have amazing, punch holes and notches and little things and bigger screens, and that's great, but it's not really a complete revolution. I was excited about this because it was something different, and it was a great opportunity for Samsung, believe it or not, to show this is what we can do with our screen technology. Because some companies, for example, Apple, they buy their screens from elsewhere. So this is something that was unique to Samsung and a few other companies like it who could really produce this sort of stuff and push the boundaries of what the smartphone could look like and what it could do. I'm interested to see, and because they've got the support of Google too in terms of the operating system, I'm interested to see how people could potentially use it. I really want to make sure that they can actually use it now, because I have a bad feeling that this is just going to stop them from bringing it in this year and maybe for all time, because it didn't catch fire, but it's not looking good.
Yeah, I think it's a real potential huge missed opportunity. We've seen a few gimmicks in phones over the years, and I know some people have dismissed this as just another gimmick, and possibly for the Galaxy Fold it is. But it's the devices that you could build after that. It's building out into laptop sizes or building much more pocketable devices. It's coming up with, as Jen said, those kind of new use cases that you can do with a bigger screen or a flexible screen. And I'll admit I'd be a little bit sad if this does kill off the foldable phone concept. But I wouldn't blame Samsung if they waited a good long time to put out the Galaxy Fold 2.
No, but and it's the same sort of thing that we saw around the tablet. Like when Apple was talking about bringing out the iPad, there was a lot of skepticism. And I'm really just talking about my household, where they looked at me and went, "Are you sure you need that? What are you doing? You have a phone and you have a computer. You do not need this thing in the middle." And yet we use them for so many different reasons now and in so many different ways. I think there is a place in the market for this sort of device. I think it just has to be proven to be rugged and ready for the market.
So, Alex, the music market is hotting up in that Google's the latest one who wants to go free. They want to give us music for nothing. Is there a catch?
This is Google, Adam. There's always a catch, and it's always ad-based. In this case, at least, the ads are pretty direct and upfront. So Google's had its YouTube Music service here for some time, and it's kind of confusing because it's a service that you can subscribe to in its own right, but if you subscribe to Google Play Music before a certain date, you could get it and YouTube Red, which is the video stuff, because with YouTube Music, you might be talking about a music video and you might be talking about music, and if you're confused already, believe me, I've got to write about this stuff, and it's confusing enough at that point. But in this case, it's fairly simple. There's now a free version, and this is free and a little different from just firing up YouTube on your phone to play that one music video clip you've wanted to see 27 million times along with the rest of the planet, because this is more akin to a streaming music service, albeit one with ads in the middle.
So can I just say, okay, Gigi, play me the Rolling Stones, or play me Let It Bleed by the Rolling Stones, or do I have much say over what I can listen to?
Not if you're not giving them money, Adam, no.
Ah,
It's a bit more akin to, people might remember when Pandora still existed in Australia, and you gave it a few kind of music genres and ideas if you weren't paying the money, and it would just play a stream of songs to you. That's what this free tier does, and it does it specifically through smart speakers. So you need a Google Home or you need a Google Assistant powered speaker. So it's not just the Google Home. You've got the LG and Panasonic and a few other ones, and the Sonos One if they ever get Google Assistant working on that thing too.
so it's not a full service. I can't get free music on my smartphone and on my tablet and my computer. It's just the time with smart speakers.
Well, not through Google, you can't. No.
Not through Google.
The elephant in the room here is Spotify, because they're all trying to take on Spotify. Everybody is trying to take on Spotify. Jen, you're a woman with music in your soul. Does the concept of free YouTube music excite you?
In a way, it does, because I'm not only a woman who listens to music, but who has multiple smart speakers all through my home, and they're not that smart. Because there's the Apple HomePod, which will only deal with Apple Music, and then you've got the Google device, and then you've got the Amazon device, and you can't really cross the streams in all of them. Like, even if you do purchase Spotify, then that's only good for 2 of those speakers, and you've still got to get Apple Music on top of that. You can potentially beam them from one device to all 3 of them, but that gets incredibly complicated. So it's actually kind of nice to have a free option. If I don't want to fully commit to YouTube Music, I can kind of use that just for apparently Latin vibes, according to Google. So to ask it for a genre of music, even though with smart speakers, I'm normally asking for it to play a specific song so I can, prove somebody wrong, for example.
Yes.
For that, of course, you could just fire up YouTube on your phone and play the song. You can still do that. Again, though, you might get a pre-roll ad.
Exactly. I mean, this makes it a bit more convenient. And like, there's only so many things I can subscribe to, and it seems like everything has a subscription model these days. And as you mentioned too, it's also incredibly confusing as to what you're subscribing to when you're talking about YouTube Music and YouTube Premium and YouTube Red. And yes, it's just, I feel like they need some sort of a chart for people to look at so they can work out what on earth they're paying for.
Now, Spotify doesn't want to be left out because they've actually just announced just this week that if you have a Spotify Premium family account, or maybe it's if you sign up for a new one, they'll actually give you a Google Home Mini. So they want to get in from the other side as well. They don't want to be left out because, as you say, everyone realizes that they're the elephant in the room that everyone's trying to push out with their own service. Which one do you think is the killer one, though? Because there's also Amazon here. They've never been that impressive in Australia, but they are going from strength to strength. They offer you a cheap version if you just want to use it with the Amazon speakers. Do you think that they could be making a comeback, so to speak, Jen?
I think that they're trying, and I think that sort of the cheaper version was definitely a sign that they were trying. I think that when you talk about Amazon Prime, they've got a lot more reasons that you subscribe to that than you subscribe to their music service. And maybe they need to start thinking about how to package that together for people, and they could bring in more money that way. It's really hard in Australia, and I think that it really comes down to what smart speaker you have, and that's where you're committed. And at some point, maybe if you're an Apple user and you've got a household full of iPads and iPhones, you're going to subscribe to Apple Music, and maybe you'll get talked into buying a HomePod for that reason, which, as I understand it, are coming down in price. And maybe if you're fully committed to Amazon, then that's what you're looking at, or if you've got a Google phone, and maybe that's how you decide. It's just becoming incredibly complicated, and it feels like the old kind of MP3 days where you'd buy a Sony player and they'd only play 8-track, and then you had to work out how to rip your CDs
and use Sony's terrible software.
Exactly.
I'm having flashbacks, people. I'm having flashbacks.
It was
Stop
so
it.
bad.
It just feels too hard. They need to simplify these things. So I understand why Google has taken this move.
Yeah, Amazon's an interesting one there as well, because you kind of mentioned bundling it together. And of course, in the States, it is all the same one thing. You just get an Amazon Prime subscription and they just say, yeah, have it all. Although also in the States, they've just launched a free music tier as well. Also, again, only though for Alexa-powered speakers. And it'd be interesting to see if we actually end up with that appearing down here anytime soon.
Ultimately, if it gets too complicated, I'm just going to put the radio on and go old school on a new device.
Well, that just about wraps up another fabulous episode of Vertical Hold. And as always, we love to get your feedback. Were you keenly waiting for the Samsung Galaxy Fold, or did you think it was a terrible technology in the first place? And what streaming music services excite you? Is free the thing that's going to get you really, truly hooked? Let us know via Twitter or the Facebook Vertical Hold page. Thanks to Jen for joining us for the show.
Thank you.
And thanks everyone for listening. Remember, we're on a big push this year to reach more people. Thanks for those who've given us the big thumbs up and a shout out. If you can, jump on iTunes or your podcasting platform of choice, leave us a review to help spread the word.
Vertical Hold is proudly sponsored by NetComm, taking Australian technology to the global market.
I'm just going to have to pause this for a second because my new kitten has just broken into my office.
Oh dear.
Which is the best excuse I've ever had for this show.